Are you tired of waiting on God? Want instant blessings with zero effort? Well, you're in luck. Welcome to Fast Food Faith, where we serve up feel-good Christianity fast. Want a forgiveness burger with zero repentance on the side? A quick blessing salad hold the obedience? Well then, we've got exactly what you're looking for. Or do we? Is fast faith really faith at all? Real faith takes time, trust, and surrender. Don't settle for the cheap substitute. Fast food faith won't last. Let's go deeper.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's good. So that happened. If you feel like that was cringy, you're correct. It was supposed to be. When I got asked to do that, it was like, all right, we're going to make a commercial. It's going to be cringy. It's going to be kind of 80s style. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then it hit me that I would be following the first time that you saw it, which makes it even more awkward for me. So good morning. Thanks for being here. We're kicking off a brand new series called Fast Food Faith, and we're very excited that you're here. Have you noticed the speed of things lately? When is the last time that you've slowed down, like actually slowed down enough to notice how fast things are moving? And have you ever wondered, how did we get here? As I sat down and started preparing for this message, that was the first question that I had. Life is fast. Things seem like they're being thrown at us from every side. How did we actually get here? And so here are some key moments that have sped up our culture to get us where we are. And non-history people in the room, I will make this very, very fast, and I promise that I have a point to it. But here's some key moments that have brought us to where we are. The Industrial Revolution, late 1700s. Machines are introduced, and they begin to replace manual labor. The idea was simple: more output, less time. Mass production is born in our nation, and the tone becomes progress equals speed. So therefore, anything slow begins to equal bad. Railroads and the telegraph are introduced in the 1800s. News is spread across states in minutes, and before this, it used to be days. People in communication speed up as a whole. The light bulb is invented in 1879. What happens is that there's no more sun to dictate sleep patterns. I don't know if you know this, before the light bulb, people would sleep like 11 to 12 hours a night because they would just go to bed when the sun went down, and then they would just wake up whenever they woke up. And now what begins to happen through the invention of the light bulb is we don't have to turn work off. 24/7 productivity begins to happen. The assembly line is invented in 1913, and now the only thing that matters is efficiency. People begin to be used like machines, just sped up. I'm going to take a big jump here, but then the internet is introduced in the 1990s, and we now have instant access to everything. News, information, entertainment, we've got it all. And what begins to die inside of us, even if we don't realize it, is patience. And smartphones, 2007, Apple introduced the first iPhone, and things really took off. And we took that access to everything that the internet gave us, and we just put it in our pockets. We've got the world at our fingertips. And we no longer just want it fast, we begin to expect it fast. And what begins to die inside of us, yet again, without us noticing, is focus. We've thrown open the door to distraction. In our present day, we've got streaming, social media, same-day delivery, not all bad things, but there's no more waiting, there's no more silence, there's no more stillness. We're binge-watching shows, a term literally used for addiction, and we order things that we think we need, and it shows up on our doorstep within hours. We're officially addicted to the right here and the right now. And so naturally, as our culture and our world began to speed up quickly, food began to follow suit. I don't know if you know this, but in 1921, White Castle was the first fast food chain. It became part of the brand. We got some applause for White Castle over here. And then everyone else began to play catch up with White Castle. Drive-thrus were introduced in the 1950s and 1960s. The idea was families are now on the go, so food needs to be that way too. The kitchen or the dining room table is no longer the center of the home, but the schedule becomes the center of the home. Microwaves hit every home in the 1970s, 1980s. Dinner officially switches from an event with your family to a transaction. In 2001, there's a little pizza place called Little Caesars. They actually started in 1965, but in 2001, they introduced something called Hot and Ready. And they were the first major pizza place to say, we've got pizza whenever you want it, however you want it, it's ready to go, and it's cheap too. Just walk in the door. And now in our world we live in the present day, we've got DoorDash, we've got food financing, and endless options. Literally any food you want to deliver to your front door. And I don't know if you heard about this, but a couple weeks ago, DoorDash and Uber Eats started partnering with these companies and saying, you can pay off your Taco Bell in 6 months. It's insane. And the options are just absolutely endless. When food got fast to keep up with the pace of the world, here's some things that we gave up. We gave up the table for a transaction. There's way less slow dinners, way less important conversations at the dinner table. We gave up better for faster. We stopped asking, is this good for me, or who prepared this for me, and we just started asking, how fast can I get it? We gave up connection for convenience. No more prep and patience. Our expectations are now trained to be about us and about right now. And we gave up presence for endless options. Now, why does this even matter? Are we here in church today just to get a history lesson of our world and fast food restaurants? Not exactly. The point is this as we get started, don't buy the lie for a second that all of this hasn't negatively affected our faith too. See, over the past 100 years, we've gone from kind of walking from place to place to now scrolling at the speed of light, and our souls haven't caught up yet. See, we've begun to consume information so fast and so much all at once, and this is why we often feel dizzy, disoriented, and anxious most of the time. And especially with food over the past 100 years, what it's begun to show us is we don't really need to cook, we don't really need to prepare, we don't really need to take time, and we don't really need to sit down and gather anymore. All of this has impacted our faith. Just think about it. When you get asked the question, how are you doing? Maybe here on a Sunday morning, somebody asks you that. First of all, you don't usually respond honestly, right? Even if you're doing horrible, you're probably going to say, oh, fine, good. But we don't just say that, do we? We usually say, good, just busy. It's become just a part of who we are. Yeah, things are going well, it's fine. I'm just really, really busy. I heard this the other day that a good acronym for busy is busy could equal buried under Satan's yoke. Ouch. Sorry, we had to get started that way. And whether or not you fully agree with that statement, there is truth in what it's trying to say. It's been said before that if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. I like that too. What if when it comes to the spiritual life, bad and busy are essentially the same thing? A lot of us in this room, we are overwhelmed, we're overscheduled, we're overworked, and we're just kind of burnt out by life. And guess what? When we live this way, we are living as the worst versions of ourselves. John Mark Comer says it this way: both sin and busyness have the exact same effect. They cut off your connection to God, to other people, and even to your own soul. I don't know about you, but some of my worst moments I have as a husband, as a dad, as a coworker, as a friend, surely as a follower of Jesus, are when I am so stressed out and busy that I can't slow down to notice what's right in front of me. Does anybody else relate to that? I'm shorter, I'm quicker to anger, I have way less patience, I just say things, I got to move from one place to another, and I just miss out on what's right in front of me. So many of us in this room are so busy, we don't even realize we are living under the yoke or the control or the leadership of Satan. But Jesus' yoke, his way of life, is very, very different. What I want to do this morning is just take a quick look at the yoke of Jesus, at the teachings, at his example, and what he has to show us when it comes to speed of life and how we should live. But let's start with this question. What the heck is a yoke? I've said it a few times already. That's not really, that's kind of an outdated phrase. We don't say it very much anymore. In the Bible, it has a few different meanings. There's actually 3, and we're going to use the last one. But the first one is literally a yoke was a wooden kind of instrument that was tied to 2 animals, and it was used for farming. And so you would connect 2 animals together with a yoke, and then you would attach a heavy burden to that yoke, and now these 2 large animals could split the burden and do the work together. Make sense? And so that was the literal translation of a yoke in Bible times. Paul teaches on it in 2 Corinthians, and he begins to apply that to relationships. He says it's important who you yoke yourselves to. As in, I need to make sure that the people closest to me are doing the same job and animals sharing a yoke. But there was a third way to use this as well, and this is what we're going to use for this morning. A yoke meant a rabbi's understanding and interpretation of the Bible. So every rabbi, religious teacher, Jesus was not the only one. There were hundreds and hundreds of rabbis in this time. Every one of them would read the Bible. Then they would have their own understanding of the Bible or their own take on it, and therefore expectations that they required their followers to live by. And so Jesus himself had his own yoke. As he lived and understood God's law, he said, if you're going to be a follower of mine and you're going to let me be your rabbi, your teacher, here's the expectations that I have for you under my yoke. This is important for us because a lot of us in this room call ourselves followers of Jesus, and so therefore we are his disciples, and his yoke means this is how we should live. So here's what Jesus has to say about his yoke. Matthew 11:25-30. It starts like this. At that time, Jesus prayed this prayer. O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, thank you for hiding these things from those who think themselves wise and clever, and for revealing them to be childlike. Yes, Father, it pleased you to do it this way. He's going to get to his yoke in a second, but notice the setup here. Jesus prays a prayer of thankfulness to his Father and says, God, thank you for not revealing yourself to those who think they have it all figured out. That's awesome. And a lot of us sitting in this room, especially when it comes to busyness and pace of life, we think we have it all figured out, right? I've got my schedule. I've got what I've got to do. I've got to hold this all together. It's all on me, and maybe I'll fit God into the corner. And Jesus begins this by saying, hey, God, thank you for hiding yourself from people like that. Ouch. And then in verse 27, he says, my Father has entrusted everything to me. No one truly knows the Son except the Father, and no one truly knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Jesus is saying, I know God. I am God the Father in the flesh. Everything you want to know about God, learn from me, watch my life, and you will understand who he is. And some of you are like, well, how do I know if Jesus has chosen to reveal God to me? Well, then here's what Jesus says. He'll give you the answer, verse 28. Then Jesus said, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light. Isn't that not powerful? I hope if you heard those three verses right now, if you're listening to me, you just caught the deepest sigh of relief. That's what I hope this morning. This is the Good Shepherd from Psalm 23. This is the God that we serve. What he desires from you is as you come under his leadership, what you're going to get in exchange is rest. And what's interesting about this is for those who heard this, they're like, wait, what is up with that? Because every other rabbi that we follow, they keep adding these commands and adding these rules and adding these things, and all of their disciples are burnt out and exhausted and more stressed out than they've ever been. And you're saying if we follow your yoke, we're going to get rest? This is crazy. Here's some things I want us to notice from these couple verses as we get started this morning. The phrase, come to me, all who are. I love the fact that Jesus is so inviting. No one is left out here. All are welcome, especially if you're weary and tired, which is most of us in this room. This is our God. Come to me. It's an invitation. He's saying, look, my arms are wide open. If you want to learn from me, come on. I love the phrase, I will give you rest. In our world, in the speed of our culture in 2025, what an absolutely countercultural promise that by following this God, we're going to get rest. Isn't that amazing? Which means, this is the hard truth this morning, if you don't feel that rest in your soul, you aren't under God's yoke. You're under someone else's yoke. And then the last phrase I want us to notice is, let me teach you. I love that it's worded this way. See, the problem in this room, and maybe we don't want to admit it, but the problem is that a lot of us, here's kind of how we think about this. We're like, Jesus was a really good guy. Jesus taught a lot of good things, and Jesus died on the cross for my sins, so if I believe in him, I'm going to heaven when I die, and all of that is true. The problem is that we're leaving something out. A lot of us in this room, we don't actually believe that Jesus is smarter than us. We don't actually believe that when Jesus taught, here's how you should live and here's what you should do, it's true, and it's still true in 2025 for us. We don't believe that. We hear these words and we hear them on a Sunday and we're like, that was really nice. And Jesus taught really good things. And I'm going to move on and continue to figure things out on my own. What if we took Jesus seriously? What if when he said, let me teach you, we gave up the control of our lives and said, okay, you can teach me. I heard it, somebody explaining what Jesus' yoke is. And they said beautifully, the yoke of Jesus is really simple. If you want to experience the life of Jesus, you have to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus also. I love that. if we want to experience the life that Jesus promises, that we can pray, it'll be answered. We can have a full life like he promises in John 10:10. We can have the blessings that he outlines for what his disciples can really do in life. We have to adopt his lifestyle as well. See, in Jesus' day and age, yet again, he was not the only rabbi, and his disciples were not the only disciples. Disciple, all that means is student. And so there was a bunch of rabbis with a bunch of disciples all teaching their own versions or their own yokes of God's law. And what's interesting about this is you would not find a disciple in this day and age who didn't follow every move of their rabbi. Disciples would walk through every day with their rabbi and they'd go, okay, they ate that food and they talked like this and they gave their money here and they lived this way and they treated that person this way. I'm going to go copy that into my own life. That's how discipleship worked. And yet we're in this room calling ourselves disciples of Jesus. We hear his words and don't do a single thing that he says. Why are we so confused when we don't line up with his lifestyle? When we don't experience everything that he promised? So Jesus promised that if we came to him, his burden would be light, he would give us rest, and he would teach us. Here's 3 examples of Jesus' yoke or his understanding of God's law in action. One of the ways he taught his disciples was just by living. Here's 3 examples. And by quickly looking at these, what's going to happen is we're going to end this message with a choice. We can choose to submit our lives to the lifestyle, the yoke, the pace of Jesus, or we can leave this room and just go on about our lives like we've got it all figured out. That's the choice. Jesus offered that choice to everybody who listened to his words. Here's the first example. Jesus retreated and re-entered. This was a rhythm that was so prevalent in the life of Jesus, but it's one that is missed by us all the time. Put simply, all over Jesus' story, you see times where he would retreat or he would go off to be by himself in order to come back into the busyness, clear-minded. It didn't matter if he was about to start his public ministry or if he was in the thick of his public ministry or if it was the night before the cross, you see him doing this. He would retreat into solitude and silence, and then he would come back to the demands more focused. An awesome example of this is in Luke chapter 5. In Luke chapter 5, read the whole thing. It's an exhausting day for Jesus. There are crowds, and everybody's demanding that he answers their questions, and he's teaching, and he's doing miracles, and he's doing all these things, and then we see this, Luke 5, 15 and 16. But despite Jesus' instructions, the report of his power spread even faster, and vast crowds came to hear him preach and be healed of their diseases. But Jesus often withdrew to the wilderness for prayer. Surrounded by demands, surrounded by asks, surrounded by things to do, and he would retreat to be alone. In our lives, when we have a lot on our shoulders and the schedule is full and the demands are never ending, do we ever just retreat? Do we ever just pull back from the distractions and the noise in order to fill ourselves up and then go back to all those things better than we were before? And notice, it's not just retreating for the sake of retreating. We can't find a single story of Jesus just running from his problems. Of like, okay, things are busy, I'm just going to run over here and somebody else will figure it out. We're actually really good at that in our lives. Jesus never did that. He would retreat in order to come back to those things more like sure of what God wanted him to do. And not only would he just retreat and just go numb out on Netflix or social media or whatever his addiction of choice was, but the second example of Jesus' yoke is we see what he was doing while he was retreating. Jesus withdrew to be with his Father. Every example you see of Jesus leaving the crowds and leaving the demands and leaving the schedule, he was going just to be alone with his Father. I don't know who needs to hear this morning, but did you know that God actually just wants to be with you? Some of us need to hear that. God is a good Father who desires just to hear about your day and just to lead you where you want to go. That's who this God is. There is a time for asking in prayer. There is a time for coming before him with all that we are. There's a time for saying, God, I need help in this situation. Absolutely. There's also a time for just saying, God, here I am. What do you want to do today? How do you want to use me? And then just being quiet. I love Mark 1:35. Before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray. Before the stress of the day, before the schedule got in the way and took over, before the demands got loud and he couldn't say no, he went away to talk to his Father. And I promise we have time for this. One of my favorite quotes from John Piper is this: one of the great uses of Twitter and Facebook will be to prove at the last day that prayerlessness was not from a lack of time. I love this. Anybody else find it ironic that Sunday morning while you're getting ready for church, or if you're about to come to 9:30 service, your screen time report pops up on your phone? Has anybody ever noticed this on a Sunday morning before you're going to church? When's the last time you've evaluated your screen time? Average screen time on a smartphone for most of us is 5 to 6 hours a day. For high school students and college students, that's 7 to 8 hours average. We have time for this. If we believe Jesus meant what he said, that he's smarter than us, and we want to be his disciples or his students and learn from him, we will make time for this. I absolutely promise. And the last example of Jesus' yoke in action is Jesus taught his disciples to do the same thing. It wasn't only a private part of his life. See, Jesus' time with the Father, it was consistent. It cost him things. He gave up things in order to be with his Father. It was intimate. It was personal. But it was also something he believed in so much that he taught his disciples or his students to do the same thing. This was not just an exclusive routine for like God's Son and normal human beings just like wouldn't get it. That's not what this was. This was an expectation that Jesus taught his disciples to do. If you are my followers, you will make time for talking to the Father. In Matthew 26, we just looked at all this leading up to Easter, but this is kind of near Jesus' life, and he says this after he leaves the Last Supper, Matthew 26, 36 to 38. It says, "Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove, and he said, 'Sit here while I go over there to pray.' And then he took Peter and Zebedee's 2 sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, 'My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me.'" So he leaves the Last Supper. He's got all 12 disciples. He says, "Come with me because I'm going to pray." And then he takes his inner 3, those he was really, really close to, and brings them even closer and says, "Here's what I'm praying about." This matter of retreating, of being with God, of communing with him was not a secret thing. He was teaching his disciples, you need to bring everything to God. Let me show you how. In our lives, our kids, our spouses, our people we work with, people we're discipling maybe, they are watching how we live and how we spend our time. Don't be so private about your relationship with Jesus that people around you conclude maybe it doesn't exist. It's definitely not a priority. Exemplify, hey, we're in the middle of this, we're going through this, I'm going to pray. Hey, we're about to make this decision, I've got this big meeting, I've got this going on, or there's a lot in my schedule, I'm going to pray. Exemplify what it looks like of Jesus. What we can see from the life of Jesus is that he didn't just sit around. He wasn't a lazy person. And yet at the same time, he was never like frazzled by life. From the stories that we have in the Gospels, his days were full. It's fair to say that he was an important person. He had a lot on him, but he was never frantic. He lived a full life, but we can't find a single story of him in a hurry, of him running from one place to another. You can't find it. In fact, during his ministry on earth, Jesus was known for a lot of things, and he was called a lot of names, but being in a hurry was never one of them. There was a book written in 1979 called The 3 Mile an Hour God, and it popularized this idea that the God that we serve in Christianity moves at 3 miles an hour. God's character and his heart was fully revealed through a Jewish man named Jesus, and Jesus actually lived on this earth. And when Jesus was here, most people in that day and age, they walked everywhere. And you know the pace, the speed that you walk at? It's 3 miles an hour. What would it look like for us to slow down enough to begin to walk at the pace of Jesus? Maybe, just maybe, true faith isn't always hot and ready. Maybe it's not something that you can just walk in and say, all right, Jesus, I need this, and it looks like this. Give it to me right now. Maybe it's not a transaction. Maybe really following Jesus and understanding that he is the good shepherd who wants to lead you, maybe it moves at 3 miles an hour. And maybe some of us in this room, we're moving so fast and so frantically through life that we can't even hear God calling for us anymore. We're so far out ahead of him, just running through everything that we have to do, and he's way back here like, slow down. But we can't hear it. Maybe we need to begin to find ways to slow ourselves down intentionally. It's been argued that almost all of our favorite stories of Jesus was when he was walking from place to place and he was willing to be interrupted. Are we? Or do we think we're too important? You see, when life begins to move at 3 miles an hour, here's kind of what happens. You can carry on conversations with people. You can look people in the eyes. You can gaze at the scenery. You can notice what's coming up ahead of you. Like Jesus in Matthew 6, look at the birds. You know that passage? I love that passage. But guess what would have happened if they were running through the scenery? They wouldn't have noticed the birds. You got to picture that moment as they're just kind of strolling along, and Jesus is like, look at the birds. Look at the flowers. And the disciples were like, man, that's so good. I never would have noticed that. Because Jesus was moving at 3 miles an hour. For most of us, a pace of 3 miles an hour, it won't leave us gasping for breath. At this pace, you have plenty of time to recognize other people and other things along the way. You can even be interrupted. It's been said that 3 miles an hour is the speed that love moves, because God is love. As Jesus walked along at 3 miles an hour, here's some of the stories that happened, either interruptions or while he was walking. He invited Levi the tax collector, also known as Matthew, to come join him in ministry. That's Mark 2. He healed a blind man from birth in John 9. He called Simon Peter and Andrew to follow him in Matthew 4 as he was walking along. He climbed a mountainside and then sat down with his disciples and taught them in John 6. He touched the coffin of a widow's son and brought him back to life as he was walking by in Luke 7. He joined Cleopas and his companion on the road to Emmaus with a lively conversation regarding Christ's empty tomb in Luke 24. He defied the laws of nature and he walked on water in Matthew 14. He didn't run on water, he walked. He was interrupted on his way to heal a man's daughter when a woman reached out and touched his robe. We love that story in Mark 5. He was heading to grieve John the Baptist's death when a crowd interrupted him, and he sat down and taught them in Matthew 14. Mid-sermon, Jesus was interrupted by a hole being cut in the ceiling and a man being lowered down on a mat in Mark 2. Jesus was willing to be interrupted because he wasn't frantic. He was methodical of his pace in life. For me, some of the ways that I notice myself trying to slow down, the first one is I have a 2-year-old toddler. And even though that sounds like that would speed up life, and surely my days are fuller and I miss full nights of sleep, but I've also learned how to slow down. My wife and I, we like to say about our daughter, Charlie, that she's never met a rush. She's just never been introduced to one. She doesn't know what that is. And so as we're trying to go places, you cannot speed her up. It's like, we've got to be somewhere. Put your shoes on, go here. And she's just kind of like, oh, look, my Crocs. Like, she doesn't get it. And there are moments when this is frustrating, for sure. There are also moments when I go, maybe this is the way life is supposed to be. We go on family walks through our neighborhood, and as we kind of just let her walk on the sidewalk sometimes, and I'm kind of like, I'm trying to burn some calories here. Like, come on, what are we doing? And then I stop and I notice she's noticing every flower in the grass. She's noticing the birds in the trees. She just told me what color the car was as it drove by. She's hearing the train in the distance. Maybe life is better this way. Maybe I have to give up some production, like I won't be as productive and I won't look as good, but maybe life is better. I won't look as good, but maybe at the speed of a toddler sometimes. Maybe that's how it was supposed to be. For me personally, every Friday night at 6 p.m. to Saturday at 6 p.m., I take a 24-hour phone Sabbath. Just for 24 hours, my phone pretty much turns off. And we have no excuses in the world that we live in because my iPhone is set up with a scheduled do not disturb setting to turn on without even me clicking a button every Friday. And when it clicks on, no notifications get through. About 5 people's texts come through. The Bible app comes through. That's about it. And for 24 hours, can I just tell you, after 4 years of doing this, it's my favorite 24 hours of the entire week. Like every Friday afternoon, a couple hours before this, I'm like clearing all my notifications, and I'm like, I'm about to put my phone away. This is going to be awesome. And then it turns on, and it's a weekly reminder for me of this. I'm not God, and everything's going to be okay without me. And as human beings, you need to find ways to remind yourself that you're not God, and everything's going to be okay without you. In high school one time, I had a teacher. He was frustrated, and he told our class kind of out of anger that we need to learn to be where our feet are. And I have no idea if he was a Christian or what his worldview is, but 10 years later, I'm still thinking about that. Man, I got to learn to be where my feet are. Or as Jesus says in Matthew 6:34, so don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Today's trouble is enough for today. There is only one speed that matters in the life of a disciple of Jesus. It's not how fast you get things done. It's not how good you look to other people. It's not how fast you can accomplish whatever you're trying to do. It's this, how fast you respond to his commands. That's what matters. When Jesus asks you to do something, or when you see what his yoke, his pace of life looks like, will you say yes to him or not? Because for those of us in this room that maybe are spiritually immature or we're just not submitted to the yoke, maybe are spiritually immature or Jesus, when we hear these kinds of things, you know what we begin to do? We begin to make excuses. I can't give up that way of life. I love that. That's how I spend my time. That's what everybody does. Everybody lives that way. We just begin to tell ourselves these things. So Jesus doesn't know my schedule. That worked 2,000 years ago, but it surely won't work in 2025. Or the worst one, if I live that way, that's legalistic. A.W. Tozer once said that the church will be at the height of its heresy when it calls obedience to Jesus legalism. Ouch. Those who are submitted to the yoke of Jesus and they really believe that he knows better than them, when he asks them to do something or exemplifies something in his life, they're going to say, yes. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know how it's going to play out. I don't know how I'm going to not do that or not live that way, but Jesus, yes, I trust you. So as we close, here's a few thoughts on how to respond to Jesus' command with a yes. When it comes to speed of life and busyness and pace and all those things, here's 4 ways we can say yes. The first one is to pray first. Yet again, Jesus modeled this over and over and over again. It might sound redundant, but maybe it needs to because a lot of us don't pray. Jesus modeled a time of prayer, a dedicated, consistent time to listen to the Father. Do we have this? It's been said that the lifeblood or the true sign of someone's relationship with God is how much they choose to talk to him. Do we have that? Paul tells us to pray without ceasing or to never stop praying. It looks like saying no. Every yes to something is a no to something else. Did you know that? And so the logical thing to do is to evaluate, here's all the things being asked of me. What am I going to say yes to? So when I hear what Jesus' way of life is and what he's asking me to do, I'm going to say yes to that, but I know I'm going to say no to some other things. Some of us in this room, we're trying to just say yes to everything, and just please let me say this to you this morning. You can't. That's fake faith. True obedience to Jesus means you will have to give up some things. But we are standing on the promise of Matthew 6:33 that if we seek Jesus above all else, he's going to give us everything we need better than we ever could have imagined it. It looks like slowing down. It looks like rest. It looks like intentionally withdrawing from the noise. If that's a weekly 24 hours, if that's every night when you get home for a couple of hours with your kids, whatever that looks like, it's intentionally finding ways to disconnect. From the beginning of time, God established a weekly pattern and a rhythm of slowing down and worshiping him. I don't know if you know this, that's in the 10 Commandments, and it may be the most neglected commandment of all of them by us. We are commanded to slow down and disconnect from the world and let God be God. Mark 2:27, Jesus says that Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. And what he means by saying that is we weren't made to be lazy. Your life was not meant to just sit around and do nothing. You were made to work and partner with God and bring his goodness out in the world. But Sabbath was made for man. It was supposed to be a weekly thing where you slow down and you disconnect and you put God in his place and put yourself in yours, and you're actually set up to be more productive the rest of the week. And the last one is applying WWJD. Anybody remember those bracelets? They're still popular. This one is simple. John 14:12, Jesus tells us, if you're my disciples, you'll do what I say. He puts it so simply. There was no in-between for him, which means if we don't follow Jesus and his disciples and his way of life, we're not his disciples. When Jesus taught to thousands of people, there was 2 crowds, no in between. There was those who were his disciples who he knows would hear what he said and do it, and then there was just the crowds, and he was like, hey, what's up? This is for the disciples. There was no in between. If we call ourselves followers of Jesus, we have to do what he commanded us to do. WWJD, what would Jesus do? I've heard this qualifier. It's really helpful. What would Jesus do if he were me? So if Jesus was me, in my home, in my community, with my job, with my kids, with my wife, with my skills, with all these things, what would Jesus do if he were me? If he was making this decision, if he was going here, if he was going to say this, if he had to do, what would Jesus do if he was me? And as I begin to apply that in my life, I begin to live under Jesus' yoke, which is better than the yoke of the world. Would you pray with me? Father, we just thank you for your son, Jesus. We thank you for the fact that you sent your son here in flesh, fully man, to live on this earth for 33 years. The reason why that's so important is because it wasn't just theory. You didn't just tell us what to do and then sit back and watch it happen, but you stepped into our story. You exemplified how we can live. Lord, that's important because for us in this room, we have the example of Jesus before us. We can read his words. We can look at his examples. We can look at what he taught, what he said, and what happened after he did those things. And Lord, we're left with a choice. Will we truly follow him with our lives, or will we think we have it all figured out? Lord, we thank you for the fact that Jesus taught us what to do when it comes to speed of life and busyness and pace and how to find you in the middle of it all. Lord, if there's anybody in this room who is burdened by life and overwhelmed and stressed out, Lord, I pray this morning we can be convicted enough to begin to hand things over to you. We can begin to retreat and get filled up with your voice first. We can begin to find our worth and our identity in not how much we're doing or how much we're carrying, but just in being your son or your daughter. Lord, we can hand these things to you because we were never supposed to carry this much on our shoulders. And we can begin to slow down. We can begin to slow down. Our schedules and our busyness and our full plates, clear-minded and more focused on what you want us to do in every situation. Lord, I pray this room begins to dream and envision what life would look like if we lived like Jesus. Lord, I pray we don't allow the excuses to take over when it comes to how busy we are and how fast life is moving, but we actually apply these things in order to experience your love and to love other people better. It's in your name we pray this morning. Amen.